Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a beautiful evening full of rain outside, which makes me incredibly happy. And I think we all are looking forward to some clean, fresh air tomorrow morning, which will be lovely as well. Thanks for joining us tonight on this WUMSA open mentoring session. As always, if you've joined our sessions before, you know how impactful tonight's conversation is going to be. And we're in the very safe hands of our mentoring guru, Bryony Lieber, and one of our WUMSA mentors who is going to be facilitating tonight's conversation, Valencia Parsuraman. So over to you, Valencia.
Thank you, Raksha, and good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for making the time to attend. And I'd really say, after having attended the mentoring program as a mentee, you have not wasted your time. You're going to enjoy tonight. So just make a cup of coffee, make a cup of tea, get comfortable, and please feel very comfortable to share. This is a safe space. If you have any issues and find yourself disconnected, we are recording the session as well. So please know that if you miss anything, the content will be available. So this month in the mentoring program, we have been talking about connecting through communication. And we've unpacked so many different aspects of it, but I think the main idea is that we cannot escape from effective communication. I think regardless of the role that we're in our company, it plays a huge role. And joining us today, we have some very special guests, one of which is already on the call. We have Christia Ace. And if I can just share a little bit about Christia. So Christia is a distinguished professional with an impressive track record in the engineering, construction and manufacturing industry. She is currently serving as the Group Learning and Development Manager for the Weir Minerals Group PLC. Christia's journey is marked by remarkable contributions both within and outside of her professional sphere. Christia served on several boards, including the CETA board, BUSA subset, MERSA, Metal Chamber, and CIFSA ITSAC committees. There's so much to talk about Christia, but I know that she has such a heart for people. And I think that she is going to just give us such nuggets of wisdom today. Very close to her heart is enhancing the skills and capabilities of the workforce. In her career, she's seen about 300 graduates come through her doors, go through the development programs, including myself. So she really played a huge part of my growth and provided me with the open door that I needed at Weir. So I'm really grateful to have you here, Christia. Just another thing about Christia is that she is a compassionate advocate for mental health awareness. She is one of the visionary founders of the You Matter Walk, which is an annual event that draws nearly 1,000 participants. And it creates awareness about mental health, but also offers support to individuals dealing with challenges of suicide. Christia, thank you so much for availing yourself to speak with us today. And welcome to everybody that is on the call if you just joined. And thank you, Raksha and Bryony, for this opportunity. So I think we'll get straight to it. We have another speaker joining a little bit later, Murendeni, and I'll introduce her as we go on. I also know in the communication we've mentioned Hussein Isak will be joining. Unfortunately, life happens and he couldn't make it today, but he did send his apologies. But I think we've got incredible women on the call, and if there's any gentlemen, then thank you for joining. But Christia, we've been speaking about effective communication, and if I could just ask you to start us off and just share a little bit about how effective communication has been a part of your growth in your career.
Thank you so much, Valencia, and thanks for the opportunity to come and talk to you and involving other people in this journey. So I think effective communication have a huge impact, and for me personally, it was only once I learned a bit more about neuro-linguistic programming to understand that my words actually have an impact and a message, and the person that's receiving it actually that steer their thoughts and their behavior. Because you always think people respond to you as a person, sorry for the voice that keeps on going with the sinuses with all the dust. Hopefully the rain will help for that. For me personally, in my career, and there's a couple of scenarios that I can mention, is communication skills are so important. If we don't understand our impact on other people and their impact on us, and words is actually carrying, I want to say, a big portion of that message, although the body language plays. I'll use the example. I've recently, or not recently, before I worked at a big company, and I jumped in when I started there. They were busy with a merger. And I just thought, I know what learning and development managers do. And I jumped in with the job. And I had my first performance review. And it was a really bad, I think it's the only one in my career that was really one that put me back, because I realized that we didn't communicate properly. There was lots of emails sent because of the merger that happened in the business, but we didn't actually specify what we need from one another. And I got a bad review because I jumped in and thought I know what other people want, but I didn't listen because there wasn't enough clear communication in that job. And I learned that day, although it feels like the other day, because I clearly remember how it made me feel. Good communication is a two-way street. It's not one person, it's both people. And if you don't understand, you have to ask the question and you have to clarify. You don't have to assume. Assumption is not part of good communication. So in my career, I've learned over and over again, working with internal customers, external customers, if we don't communicate, and there's lots that I can talk about it, but also think about what our words are actually portraying to other people, how it makes them feel, and what we receive, then we're going to have lots of obstacles in our careers, which is going to stop our growth and make you feel inadequate. So really important to understand. And communication so much more. It opens doors. It opens doors to everything.
Wow, thank you, Christia. And I think for me, like as you were sharing, you said that you didn't listen properly, and I think probably all of us on this call can think of an example where we haven't listened properly. And listening's actually been a big part of this discussion this month. And on that note, I'm not sure if there's anyone on the call who maybe wants to share an example of perhaps where they haven't listened well, and what they've learned from that. Maybe Brownie, would you like to give us an example?
Yeah, I think also following on from what Christia is saying, communication opens the door, but communication also shuts the door if you are not communicating well. And I can think of so many examples where somebody's been saying something and I've not been listening to what they're saying because I'm going, I want to respond. I've got these things to say. I'm going to be so clever. I'm going to say all these amazing things and blurt out all sorts of stuff, only to find that actually what I was saying was not relevant at all, or that somebody had already said it, and that I wasn't connecting to exactly what was being said. And I think we all do that. And the impact of that is that it makes the person who is speaking feel like they haven't been heard, that they're not valid, that they're not valuable. And the moment we stop listening to each other and the moment we demonstrate that we're not actually hearing each other, we start to put up our defenses. And we start falling into a whole host of communication traps that disconnect us and shut the door on being able to actually connect and communicate. And I every single day, if I'm not conscious, I want to interrupt. Every single day, if I'm not conscious, I want to say something, because so often we lead with our ego and want to be heard. We want to kind of come across as being clever. And it takes so much conscious effort to actually just step back and to listen and to wait and to give people space. And to not listen in order to respond.
Thank you, Bernie. That's quite beautiful. And it actually reminds me of some statistics that I read where they said that in companies, leaders believe that people who are good listeners are often key to dealing with conflict situations, perhaps better than people who do not listen. Christy, I don't know if you can think of maybe an example or a story that maybe comes to mind where you've met someone who actually was a good listener and the fruit of that, perhaps.
So there's lots of stories in our careers that we can think about. But I remember when I worked in, I'll say the company's name, Grinica LTA, I met one of the MDs, and it was a very brief interaction that I had with him when they introduced him in the offices. And in those days, I was still an HR officer. And I met him 2 months later, and he could tell me when did I start with the company, who was my kids, and the names of my children. It had such a huge impact on me that he, as an MD, me that's just an HR officer, could remember everything that he asked me that day, that I really tried to follow in his foot tracks, because I said, this is an example of, and I'm not good with names, I don't remember all the detail, but that day, for a managing director to care enough, to listen enough, I was so motivated. I did double the work that I had to do for the company, because it just felt like I belonged, because he listened to me as an individual. And he really made me feel like I'm somebody that's worthwhile listening to and remembering the details. Because on average, if we ask people how you're doing, you might remember good or something, or the moment they start talking, I liked what Bernard said, is that we interrupt or we jump in and say, oh, you said last time you done this, but you might have the wrong information. We don't really listen to retain the information and actually do something with it. So I know that's not really a growth one, but I think if we as leaders, and us as leaders that's actually growing to go into a learning path for leadership, think about how we make others feel if we don't listen. It's really important. I always say to my daughters, in every situation that you're, put yourself in somebody else's shoes. So if I come to Valencia and I try to explain to her what have recently happened or something about the UMAT walk, and I come to her 2 days later and she asks me the same question, how does it make me feel? It makes me feel like it's not worthwhile to tell the story again. And Valencia, it's just an example. You, the best listeners that I've known so far. But just always think how you would feel if you're the person on the receiving end that's not being listened to. And that usually helps you to listen better.
Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you, Christia. And actually, I think you brought across a really good point, because I think when I sort of just started in the industry, that is also my perception of managers, in that the higher you go, the less that they need to listen. But it's so refreshing, that example that you said. And even we had one of our board members come recently to the company, and she was asking about the women's network that we have, and she was also just listening, and it meant so much, because we're at completely different levels, but the interest was still there, and she treated us, and just by listening it made us feel valued. Raksha, if I could maybe ask you, from a leader's perspective, what is is there like I don't know, like a trend that you've seen in your career, like as people go up, are they listening more or listening less? What is the culture at the moment in the mining industry specifically?
I think to be very, very blunt and honest, is very individual based. I think that there are definitely certain leaders and CEOs who put a lot of time and effort to be intentional into actually paying attention. And there are some people who just believe that because they're at a certain level, they don't need to listen further. And I think that, sometimes they can be, I don't know, it's the example of the mentors and the anti-mentors, right? So I learned a lot from the people who never paid attention, and from the people who consciously made you feel that you weren't important enough for them to pay attention to you. And I mean, I could take that in everything that I do, because for me, listening is one of the most important skills, I believe, as a leader. And I like the example Christia used. I make a point of remembering kids' names, birthdays, what's happening. If you told me something a month ago, I will remember to follow it up, because I believe it creates a different sort of human relationship and human connection, which is super important. I mean, even if I go to a restaurant, and like if I go to a specific restaurant that I go to all the time, I remember the waiters' names and stuff, because I think it's important. And it just brings about an entirely different connection that you build with the person, and what you do to that person, I think, is huge as well. So from a trend perspective, I think industry is shifting so much with more diversity being brought into leadership spaces that I think people are being forced to listen whether they like to or not. And I think that sometimes there's so much more that is said when you listen to the unspoken as well, because then I think that that's one of the strengths that women bring into leadership very well, because we're not just listening to what is being said, and we're not, I mean, sometimes we definitely listen just to like put our point in and to have that argument closed off. I mean, I think we do that in all aspects of life, right? But there's so much as well that we listen to and pay attention to that people are too afraid to say, or are not saying, or saying in a different way. So I think that it's one of the powers that we as women leaders bring to the table. And I'd like to think that more and more people are picking that up as well, and using that in their day to day. At least I hope so. Bryony?
Okay.
I just wanted to share an anecdote from I'm not going to mention who, but I've been coaching somebody who's moved quite high in the mining industry. And this person keeps on saying to me that they're very surprised that their technical competence is not being challenged as they move further and further up the organization. What's being challenged is their ability to communicate and to listen and to step back and to coach and to really give space and all the soft skills that are actually quite hard. And this person keeps saying to me, but nobody's challenging my technical abilities. I'm finding I'm having to strengthen my communication skills. And with genuine surprise that this is what he's experiencing. And I think the most important thing that we all need to know is that the further we go in our careers, the less our technical skills become the challenge that holds us back, and the more it is our communication skills that are make or break. Because the higher we go, the less we have to do the work. We have to do the work through others. And what counts is our work starts to change quite dramatically. It's not about delivering a thing, it's about communicating what others beneath or below us in the organization are doing. And I really just wanted to share that because I've met a number of coachees in the last couple of years who've genuinely been surprised that it's not their technical skills that matter the further they go up in organizations.
I think to extend on what you're saying, I think I probably easily spend about 80 to 90% of my day listening or talking to people on the softer skills, as we call it. The technical aspect is you prove yourself as you climb that level from a technical competency perspective, right? And it's about now motivating and driving your team in order to give their best out, because you're surrounding yourself with a very strong team. So listening to what they need and how best to service them is probably the biggest thing that we bring to the table. I think today I probably spent the better part of my day. Maybe if I got to my emails in an hour, it would have been too long, because the most of the time was about different people, challenges, and issues. And that requires listening, but it requires listening on a totally different way, as opposed to listening to react and to comment and to give feedback. You've got to listen to actually be able to sift through it and help to find guidance and solution and mentorship, which is challenging. So it's a skill that's invaluable. I think if you master it at the younger age of your career, as you climb that ladder, it becomes that much easier as well.
Thanks, Raksha. And I love that we're actually having this kind of conversation, because I think a lot of us enter the working world without knowing it, because we just from university, from school, you just focus on technical growth, honing your skills. And this is like a whole nother set of skills that we actually need to develop. And yeah, I think that that's really important. I see Ndamu's on the call, and Ndamu shared a really great story with us on our first call about an example where she had to think about communication, and I think she acted on integrity, which is great, because that is the kind of person that she is. But I think there's a lot of times where we're faced in a situation where there's a gray area. We can either communicate it or we don't communicate it. Ndamo, would you like to maybe just share a snippet of your story, if you wouldn't mind? Is Ndamo still on the call? She may be
Yes,
She
I'm
is.
here.
She's just wondering why she's
She's
been put on the
hiding.
spot.
She's hiding.
Hi, evening, ladies. Thanks, Valencia. I think what we spoke about the other day was it was mostly on integrity because I had some interview, and then somehow I had told my seniors that, you know what, there's this opportunity, and I think I should just go for it and see what's going to come out. So what I usually do is I try to have this honest conversation with my superiors that, you know what, okay, this is where I want to go. And I try to come to them with that mindset that if I can get these here, it will be better. But if you can provide this, it should be fine. You should be fine with me trying to explore it somewhere else. So I went out with that mindset, and what came out from that, somebody saw me who eventually told my superiors. Probably they thought I didn't notify them before coming to the interview. So I think for me, just in general, in summarizing everything, is integrity. It's something that is so it can break relationships if not handled well. And just in a workplace, things like that, we try to shy away from telling our bosses or our seniors that, okay, I have an interview. We try to shy away from that. A lot of people will advise you, do not do that. Who does that? Who tells them they're going for an interview? But for me, I feel like we need to be so clear. Every one of us in a company or in an organization, we have our own path. And if my path or my goals here are not going to be realized, or I'm not going to be adding value, I'm just going to be a frustrated employee, I won't be useful. So we need to have those honest conversations with each other. So for me, communication is very important, whether it's just uncomfortable or it's important at any stage. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ndamu, and like kudos to you for making that decision, because it's not always an easy one. And when you were sharing, I was thinking of the word fear, because why was it a sort of a choice? A lot of us find ourselves in these situations, and that is something we spoke about even earlier in our talks. Was fear is such a big part of what I think holds us back from effective communication. Sorry, Bernie, I will hand it over to you to add to that. Yeah.
So I love Ndamu's story because what she's talking about is making her intentions explicit to people. And one of the big communication traps that we fall into is that we judge others based on what we see, but we judge ourselves based on our intentions. And so when people observe your behaviors and they see what you're doing, but they don't actually understand the drivers beneath those behaviors, they can judge you and make assumptions and decide on your behalf what it is that your behaviors are communicating. And so for somebody to observe her going to an interview, they're judging what she's doing there. Having already communicated her intentions to her bosses, when somebody comes and says to them, oh, Ndamu was at an interview, they already know what her intention was. And I think this is such an important thing for so many of us, because we are constantly making judges based on our frameworks for making sense of the world. And when our frameworks for making sense of the world are different to somebody else's, we can so often misunderstand what we see and hear. And what Christia said earlier is, if you don't understand, you have to ask. If you observe somebody's behavior or a look on their face or their body language and it doesn't make sense to you, you have to ask. Otherwise, all we're doing is making assumptions, because we think that the way I think is how everybody else thinks. And that is one of the biggest ways for us to completely miss understand and disconnect from each other. And I wonder if Christia can maybe add to that.
So definitely, actually, you reminded me of something. So both you and Daru. So I'm going to use an example, and it's easiest to explain it on that. So way back when, it feels like ages ago, I was offered an industry position with one of our industry boards. Really stunning position. It sounded really great. They had the word director in it. You think you want to. It's for industry board, everything. But something didn't feel right. And I went to question and said, okay, I got this because you identified me or headhunted me, but started asking the questions. And I know till today that I wouldn't have fitted that job because I went and I asked the questions, what is it about? And I've tried to look at what do I want from a job and where do I want to go? Although it was fearful, this is so glamorous, I really want the title, but is the job really aimed? And I would have had lots more exposure to various things, but the job wouldn't have brought me personally the satisfaction of working with the items that I could. It had a big sales portion to it, and I'm not as good as Valencia and her team making sales. I'm giving money away, not good making money. So just to be honest, that's what HR do. We pay people, we train people, we give money away. But what I've learned from that is also, although I was scared to ask the question because it was such an honor to get this job, and I took for granted in the beginning that it would be glamorous, it would be great, it's going to be all these things, made my own assumptions from my own frame of mind, and really a public job that's in, if I can say, really being seen out there. But in the end, if you look at your values, and that's important, that is supposed to come through your communication, is who am I and what do I value? And what are my beliefs? To be honest and authentic to yourself is really important, not just in job hunting, like we used the two examples, but in everything that you do. And I think we think of it in our work relationships, but it's not just work relationship. Communication have an impact on everything that we do every day. Every email that you send, every WhatsApp or SMS, or I don't know what the young people use anymore because I'm of the older generation, but you don't know how it lands on that side and the impact that it has because you're not in that situation. Brioni said that we all have a framework that we think through it, and we think everybody thinks like we do, but they don't. Everybody comes from a different angle. I might have had a really bad day, and you sent me in capital letters, where's your report, or where's your this, or where's your that, or have you done this? And the way I perceive it is I'm not good enough and I'm excluded. Somebody used a very good word, I'm disconnected immediately. I think it's so important that we think of how would you experience that message when you're getting it, and always think of what you value and what you want is the way that you must communicate to others, and be the leader that you want to work with and work for, that you use the communication the way that you would like to receive it and not the way that you currently might receive it, or the way that people are not listening to you, or the way that people are not correctly communicating to you. So it just brought that, I remember that so well, that if I didn't ask, I would have sat in a job which I hated, although it had all the right tick boxes. It wouldn't have been for me, but I could clarify. So communication, remember I said, and I think Brioni said too, it's always a two-way street, and it's important to think about it. Brioni, I don't know if that was what you were looking for.
Absolutely. Anything you add is what we're looking for, I think. Let's also talk about kind of stepping into the language of your listener. And actually, because you've very rightly said, we assume that others think like us and speak like us and make decisions like us and understand what we're saying because we understand what we're saying. But so often when we're talking, we're thinking about, this is what I want you to know. I'm not thinking about what you might want to know, what's important to you, and how to communicate it in a way that you understand. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about kind of the thought process of stepping into what the audience or the listener needs so that you can craft your messages in the way that resonates with your audience.
So I just want to thanks for that question. I see we have a hand up. Do we have to respond to that hand first, Sifu Kasi? Do you want to ask something before I respond?
Um, Actually, I think Brioni has really covered. Good evening, ladies and gents, if there's any gents. Um, I wanted to ask, I'm a very boisterous person. I am loud and move around like a tick. I'm that kind of person. So it becomes so difficult to communicate myself because sometimes loud is mistaken for shouting. Um, and when I try to minimize myself, make myself a bit smaller or softer, it's not me. So I end up being unhappy and uncomfortable. So in such a situation, can you help just how do I communicate myself? How do I find the balance between the two without offending my listener, but still being true to myself?
Hey, it is a difficult one with so many cultures, but as Brahani said, so how do we adjust to help our listeners and use the language that our listener need? Sometimes we have to make adjustments, and I've learned it. I've mentioned to them, I've done training today for Train the Trainer for Chili Company, and I have a habit. If I get very excited, and Valencia will know it well, I go very fast, and I just pick up speed. Although it's in English, I just pick up speed and run, but I had to call myself back the whole time to remember that I'm good at listening to other accents. And I said to them, it's a brilliant thing in South Africa that we can listen to different accents and dialects, and we can hear people, even though they speak English, how deliciously, if I can use that word, as everybody's joking. But in other regions, they don't have that benefit of having so many cultures in one country together that we can listen. So it's really important that even, and I like how you said it, that it's who you are. My thing is I can talk very fast and I can use lots of words in between. But I have to slow down if my audience is an audience that struggle. And I have to think about it. We have a habit in South Africa to use very difficult English words and high English words, if I can say, we speak at a very high level, to bring it back to basics and to think about if that person's just capable of English, and I've done it recently for Malaysia too, that you must help them. And I think it's the same for all customers, as you must think of what is the message that they want from you. If I'm going to sit in front of a customer that have a mind that stands still at the moment, and they want something from me, it doesn't help to tell them we're bringing out new products and da. They have a current problem. So my language and my communication must address where they at. It mustn't address what I want to bring there and what I want to discuss. Loud is not a bad thing. I think open, honest, being yourself. And it might just be in the first one or two meetings that you have to hold back a bit and just let people get used to you and they get to know to you. And I can't remember the name. Was it Simpiwe I don't see the name now. Sipukazi. I thought I saw it. It was at the top and then it moved. But Sipukazi, I think it's brilliant to just be yourself. But sometimes people need a bit. It's like that new mom-in-law. She needs time to get used to you before she can start loving you. And I think that's what communication does. It gives them you build the bridge. And then when you cross, then you're just yourself. So give yourself time to be there and meet people where they're at.
Thanks, Christia. Thanks, Abakazi. Hope that answers your question. I see we've got Juliana's got her hand up. Juliana, would you like to share?
Hi, ladies. I have something to add about this talking loud and shouting. I was in a situation, there was somebody shouting over the phone, was quite unpleasant, and the person was very rude. And I had a second experience with that same person in a different situation, and she was behaving, she got the same behavior. So I think we need to think before we being loud to somebody. Do I want to convince somebody of my point of view, or I'm just emotional? I think there's a difference in being emotional, talking loudly to somebody, and being firm while you're talking loud. based on facts. If you're firm based on facts, you know what you want to communicate, even if you want to shout on that person, that you cannot, because then you are in trouble. But be firm and talk in a very firm and loud, not loud voice, but in a high volume, I would say, that you can prove the respect and put your point of view in a way that you don't need to shout on somebody. I think that's something to regulate, because sometimes we want to shout in some situations, but we can't, we can't. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Juliana. And I think that's a really great point, because sometimes when you are the listener, we're not always in a great position. And I think that it's so important to also, like you said, stand your ground. I was in a situation a few months ago where we were dealing with someone at work, and we were chatting about a project, and she was very rude to me. She is not based in our South African business, elsewhere, but she was very rude. And my manager and some other people within the company, they saw the communication, and they were like, no, you must tell her off. And everybody was giving me ammunition, almost like, you got to tell her this and this. And at that moment, I just felt like, you know what, this would not be me if I speak like this. Even because their perception was, if I speak loudly like her, the situation will be resolved, because I had an answer for it. And I just felt like this, sometimes you got to pick your battles. And I just felt like I didn't want this to be a battle, because I wanted to fight the fact with the fact, or the argument with the fact. So anyway, I was calm, and I just focused on the fact, and I focused on what I had done and why I had given her this response. And her feedback was completely different. Then she was nice to me. And I know this doesn't happen with everybody, but I guess my point is, being the listener is sometimes not, we're faced also with decisions. When you hear something, you can either hear a bad report, hear criticism, hear something negative, and either match the level of the person that's speaking to you, start an argument, or you can maybe identify an opportunity, see the opportunity in correcting the issue, in finding a resolution. And that's not always an easy thing. Christia, what advice would you give for people in that situation? Because I'm sure you've dealt in many cases where you've been on either end, but how would you, because it's not an easy thing when you're almost being spoken down to, but what would be your advice in that situation?
So, Valentia, I think you already did something really good. You were authentic to yourself. So you didn't go to that level of shouting. And I think I just want to differentiate a bit. There's shouting, and then there's being loud, and it's different things. But shouting I've seen, and I'm going to use it a bit different, more in written style, and then I'll give you some examples. It recently happened to me. A manager wanted something very urgent, again, in another country. And I just get these Teams messages, but it's like 3 words, 5 words, 3 words, 5 words. And at some stage, there was a whole eruption. It felt like a volcano, because I think with short sentences like that, you miss each other. And I then said, I'm sorry, the intent was not this and this. Please, can we rather arrange a call and discuss it? It took us 2 minutes in a call to discuss it, which was about 5 pages of team messages where we really missed each other. And I think that's the problem with language. The way that I express something comes from my framework, as Brene said it. So it's my style, my way of saying it. The way you respond change how I then address it again. And misunderstandings create so quickly. Now, in some areas of the world, it's fine to come over heavy and shout. And I don't mean be loud, I mean shout. It's not our style. Our style is usually, and people think we are shy or something if we stand back and think first and then respond in a more, I want to say, controlled mannerism. It's really important that we actually talk to one another. And my thing is always, is if you can't say to the person, I don't appreciate how this has worked out, it's better to then do a proper email, but have somebody check it, because it will be very emotional, and say, can you check? This must just be the fact, and let's clear the air. the big thing is, again, like they say with a marriage and everything, don't go and sleep when you are upset with one another. It works like that in all relationships. Don't hope it's going to disappear tomorrow morning. Address it. People won't understand how you feel or experience it if you are not honest about it. So my rule is always is, if you do something, I don't understand it and I'm unhappy, address it. If it's somewhere very higher up and if it's somebody lower, if you're not sure how to do it, find somebody that you can, a mentor or coach that you know in the business that's maybe a bit more senior than you, and say, this has happened with this individual. Can you tell me how you would approach it? Or can you tell me, this is the way I would like to approach it. How do we do this? And that's really important for me, is that to think about it, but don't leave it. Please don't leave it, because it's just going to build up and erupt too. And it's usually just misunderstanding.
Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you, Christia. Sibukazi, you've got your hand up.
Yes, actually, Christia said something that really touched me, and the saying that you teach people how to treat you came to mind as she was speaking. I loved your approach and how you said you spoke to her at first gently, and the attitude and the whole environment of the conversation, or how she was talking to you, changed, and you were lucky. Sometimes it doesn't happen like that, and you have to bring the thunder, unfortunately. But either way, you need to teach people how to treat you.
I really love that quote. Thank you, Subakazi. I think I'm gonna definitely put that on the group for anyone that's missed the call. And on that note, if I can just share, so last week I was very fortunate to visit some clients at our Cape Town area with Janine, and I see Janine's on the call. And I think that when you said that quote, Subakazi, that brought to life that memory, because Janine's been in the industry for many years, and she shared with me experiences with different clients, but when they see her, like, their face just lights up. And I feel like probably that's something she's had to work on in her career, but to have that growth happen, it's not just an overnight thing. Janine, would you mind maybe just sharing a little bit on that? How did you go about teaching people how to treat you? Oh, Janine, I don't know if you can hear us. Raksha, maybe if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about that, because I know you probably have to deal with so many different types of people throughout your career. How did you do it? And maybe how can we create a culture to help people adapt even to us?
Oh, that's a challenging question, I think.
Right.
I think a lot of it as well comes from, I think the more we learn and understand ourselves, I think it then allows, I think like Sibukazi says, you have to kind of train people in terms of how you want to be treated as well. And I think that as we become more comfortable in who we are, and we know what it is that, our goals and our objectives are, and what it is that we're trying to achieve, when we then connect with people, we end up building those relationships based on a common foundation and framework of the same belief system, or same likes or dislikes, or whatever it might be. And I think it's hard meeting new people all the time. I mean, we actually had a chat with my team today that we're hosting First Thursday next week, and the conversation was around, you've got to put so much of yourself into those networking spaces as well when you're trying to connect and meet new people. And people will speak to you however they feel like in that moment, and you still have to reply and reciprocate in a very professional manner. And how you control yourself in those spaces is important. And it takes a lot of conscious effort and intentional thinking in order to show up as the best version of yourself in that space, sometimes quite against what you feel like in that moment. And I think whenever you meet different people, you've got to put in a lot of effort. I mean, I put a lot of effort in trying to get to know and understand someone in terms of who they are as a person, and then build a professional relationship outside of that. And when you go to different clients, you have to deal with that based on, who they are and what they bring to the table. And sometimes it's not aligned with what you are and who you are, but you sort of, you just kind of have to put in the work, I think. I'm not sure that answers what you're looking for.
No, 100%, 100%. And I think also, like you said, you put in that effort to get to know people, as human beings. And I feel like sometimes
Yeah.
we get so out of touch of that. Like, I don't know if anyone can relate, but in my head, I always thought like a networking event is something you go to with your business cards, and then you basically like want to show the other person what benefit you can bring to their company, to this event. You know, you really are building your brand, because that's kind of what a lot of us, like, that's what we thought of networking. That's how you do it effectively. You've got a set amounts of time and you got to do it. And only recently, well, in years to come, then I realized, well, actually just have a conversation with the person, allow them to get to know you as a person, read the room, read the conversation, are they engaged, you know, get to know the human being. And then I think you allow that opportunity to grow, and then you kind of just become a bit more strategic with the communication. Emily, I see you have your hand up. Do you have a similar story maybe?
Hi, ladies. I didn't catch a lot that was said due to the breaking of the signal, but I could hear when you were asking Janine a question of how she had to teach people how to treat her. So I thought of something that I have. I enjoy working in a very healthy environment where we all know what's the feel of the room, what's the feel of the office. So what I did is, because mostly the people that come there later, or say the guys that join the team later, don't know the team spirit that we have. So what we do usually when we get there, we greet each other. You find out how you're doing, how's your family doing, before you can even tell me what you need. You will come in my office, greet me, and find out the feel of the mood, so to say. So there was one guy. He came in my office, barging in. He's one of the managers. He's got an entourage of suppliers. He comes into my office. Emily, what's happening with the order 1, 2, 3, and 4? And I looked at him. So to respect him, I didn't take him on there and there. So while I was busy looking for it, I was like, hello, Hendrik, how are you? How are you doing today? How's everything going at the tailing stem? And so we started conversing at that point. Then after I did that, I gave him the feedback that he wanted. Then again, he came barging in my office. I'm under pressure. I need this and that and that. I'm like, good morning, Hendrik. It's too hot outside today. Did you put on your sunblock? You know? And I did that a couple of times to a point where he comes in my office. He first excuses himself, like, do you have a second? Can you please assist me with this? So with him, and I saw even the guys that comes with him, mostly in my office, they now adhere to those standards. You know, when they come in, they will come in a polite manner, find out if you can help them, and then put their request on the table. And I think that's how I started to command the respect, and also how to be treated. And also, I think with that, it lays a very how can I say it? You know, when you know the mood of the house, and then you know how to address the people. And then even after there is, I mean, we all go under pressure, we go through pressure. Sometimes things don't go as planned, but that doesn't mean that now you need to discharge that to everyone else. Then imagine if we all feel like that, who's gonna help who? Because we all now have pressure, we all gotta deliver, we all, you know, press for time. So I see it's working. And yeah, it's something that you have to do with every new individual that comes in who has all those bad habits, so to call them. But yeah, with him, I won it. And then including his contractors that's always with him. That's how they would come into my office and address me as such. And yeah, from there on, it's bliss. I hope I made sense.
No, 100%, and well done to you,
Thank
Emily.
you.
Gosh, not everybody is that brave to actually speak up and kind of drive the conversation that you would want to have. And you've set a precedence. Now his colleagues and the people he's working with are adhering to that. And I feel like you did it in a respectful way. So well done for that. Raksha, would you like to share?
Just a question, maybe from a different perspective. So similar to Emily, I mean, we've also got very much a very people-orientated team culture, right? Where it's all about building the relationships with the humans. But there are also a lot of people who don't want those kinds of relationships. And there are a lot of people that we encounter throughout our career journey who actually want to keep it purely professional. They don't want to engage beyond a certain point. I don't need to tell you my child's name. I don't need to tell you how my weekend was, those sorts of things. So I think maybe, I don't know if anyone here has experienced it, but I know it's something we all encounter. So maybe Christia can share a little bit about how do you then deal with that kind of situation, and what kind of communication then do we use, and how do we connect with people from that perspective?
So Rakisha, I've experienced that a lot, where people want to split work and home totally. But what I've seen is people always have touching points that they would like to share, like Valencia shared about a movie, or share about where they like to eat, or what type of food they like, or a hobby. If they're running, they might not want to share about their home or children or family because they split the two. So I always try to listen to items. And there's a big thing about situational leadership too, that they talk to you. But if you think and you enter into somebody's office or somebody's space, there's always something you can identify that's something that's important to them. It's either their certificate on the wall, and you can talk about the university they went to, or they have something on their shelf that you can look at and say, oh, I see you like this or this or this. So for me, those connection points are always the place to get somebody almost in I want to say a comfortable mood before you discuss. And people love it, as we said, that they remember. But also, and we have a couple of employees like that in HR. We've got people that don't talk about their home life. They don't stay longer. They start very early, finish early, but they move on. They like it. There's their choice and their private space. And I think part of communication is also to have that respect for somebody, that if there's certain items that they don't like to discuss or don't want to get involved in, and if they don't like company functions, that's fine too. But find the connection points. It's always important for me, is to somewhere we all have something in common. I might hate running, so I believe you only run if something is hunting you down, and I won't run. So if I run, you better run. But lots of other people love running. So find something. Mine is again photography or something else, but it's really important to find those connection points, and then to build on that. That if you found it with somebody, to build on it. If it's whatever the item might be, it might not be work related, it might not be family related, but built onto that. And that will always work for me so far.
Thanks, Christia. I think that's great advice. And I think also following up, if you've had that conversation with someone and then you see them a few weeks later and then you just bring that one point, so it's like, how's your kid feeling or whatnot. I find that sometimes, but I get quite chuffed if somebody remembers something that I've shared with them. So I think that's a great tool for us to remember. Something else that we have been speaking about is fear. And I just want to go back to it. Christia, in your opinion, where would you say, or what would be the root cause for a lot of fear that a lot of us have when communicating, whether it's listening or communicating, and what advice would you give us in combating that fear?
So, Valencia, I think there's lots of items that can influence how we communicate and what we communicate. I think in South Africa, a big item is because we haven't started the same place, everybody, and sometimes our capability in the English language, that we don't want to speak up in front of others because we're not so comfortable to express what we feel or think. We're also very hierarchical, Estelle, if that's the right word. So we think, I can't speak up to my manager or the manager above the manager. And I think that's busy being broken down, that we actually speak up, and we sometimes feel like we're not, I think, enough to be able to have an opinion and lots of discussion points and everything. So our own insecurities, our own background, the way that people have treated before, the way that we allowed people to treat us before, often influence how we actually speak up or how we raise our opinion. And quite often I've seen it, and people are not willing to speak up, for example, in bigger meetings where you brainstorm something, but they'll put it in the chat or they'll email afterwards, or they prefer going one-on-one or two people together or three. I think it's very important to know yourself, and that personal knowledge about where you come from is the most important part. And then to start working on it, that you know if your work environment requires, or if you know it's one of your, I want to say, opportunities, because it's not a weakness, but an opportunity to develop more skills, that you go into it and look into it, develop more, because it can be something that's holding you back. Because if you have the environment where you're allowed to speak up, but you always keep quiet, people are going to think you have nothing to say. The other option is, other flip side of the coin is, if you're always speaking up, but you're not listening to what actually is needed in the meeting or what others contributed. So for me, it's a lot about personal awareness, listening to others, learning from others. If you identify somebody in your circles that are really good with something, so good at listening, good at speaking up, almost, I want to say, not shadow sounds the wrong word. Maybe you can help me, Brene, but learn from them, or learn from what they're doing that's good, or not that they your coach, but they usually do stuff that's really good, and learn from them and adapt and then do it accordingly. But don't let your insecurities or your past or things that you've experienced in previous companies, or a lecturer that have been really impatient with you, or somebody, or a mom that's shouting often, or whatever, hold you back from contributing the way that you're actually capable of. Work on those things, and then if you overcome them, imagine the sky's the limit.
I love what you're saying, and I think as adults, we need to be so conscious and so skeptical of our thoughts. We can't, and everybody says you need to trust your thoughts. I completely disagree. We need to be skeptical of our thoughts. We need to notice our
I
thoughts.
agree.
We need to notice, are these actually true for me now as an adult? Or are these thoughts that were true for me as a child? Thoughts that were formed by feedback that I got from caregivers, culture, society, whatever, and that became part of my coping mechanism. Because we bring our childhood coping mechanisms into our adult lives as our inner critic voice that says, I cannot speak in a meeting because I will make a mistake and people will laugh at me. And when you can start being conscious and noticing these thoughts, firstly, you can start to go, okay, actually, these aren't my thoughts. These are my past version of myself thoughts that are trying to protect me, trying to keep me in a comfort zone, trying to keep me safe from danger. But speaking up in a meeting is not dangerous. It's not like you have a gun to your head. And what's really important is to ask yourself, are these thoughts serving me well? Or are these thoughts holding me back in a comfort zone where I cannot learn and grow? And the moment you can start to be skeptical about your thoughts and you can start to choose how you want to respond, that's when we're showing up as adults. And that's when we're allowing ourselves to actually communicate like adults. Because when we're not conscious of our thoughts, we can't actually stop that automatic process of thought sparks emotion, emotion sparks action. And speaking of fear, the moment we get into a fear state, we automatically go into disconnecting. We automatically go into fight, flight, or freeze. So we either shout at somebody, we run away, or we sit there going, I can't speak. And other than when we have a lion in the room with us, or a gun pointed at our head, or we are in real danger, our brains can't actually distinguish real danger from perceived danger. And our brains are constantly trying to keep us safe with things that we don't need to be safe from. So I think part of effective communication, to pick up on what Raksha said, is to really know yourself well and to really be able to distinguish how your thoughts are true for you or not, and actually whether you want them to be true for you. Because so many of us are led by thoughts that are just keeping us stuck and keeping us safe and keeping us hidden behind the flower pot. And that's nowhere for bold, brave, beautiful women to be. And I went off on a tangent, and like Sipakazi, I get really passionate, and like Christia, I start to use a lot of words, and there's a big difference between being passionate and being loud. And I think a lot of people have great passion, and sometimes we confuse that with being loud. And I just want to encourage Sipakazi and many others like her to continue to speak with passion, but sometimes to pace yourself to your audience so that you can warm up and they can pace to you eventually. Because often what we end up with is a clash between somebody who's really quiet and somebody who's really passionate. And it's like that. Whereas if we actually just pace to each other, we can bring the passion out of each other. And Christy, I don't know if you want to speak more about that, because that's definitely an NLP thing. And I think there's some techniques to knowing how to pace.
So pacing is a good thing, and I'm not the expert. I've just learned it because you'll laugh. I won't show you my note, but it's still slower, Christia, slower, because the moment I get passionate, I have this train to catch, and I'm almost 50, but I'm still catching the train. So it's something that I'm still learning to do. It's really important. And I think pacing is quite often what I've learned in the past is my message goes missing and people miss it because I run too fast, or I almost try to reinforce my own message with too many words that people get lost in this. There's not a nice word in English that I can think of, but this chaos of words if you do too much. So what I've learned, and I've done a few courses already, but I'm still catching my train, as I said, is that if you can say something in lesser words and almost let it sit with people, that your message will go further. So we have this habit to just want to almost have verbal diarrhea to say, this is what I want to get. And then people get lost in this maze of words and you finish and they don't know what you wanted to say. So important is to pace yourself. I don't know all the techniques and I can't remember them that well, although I know I've looked at them. But to try to, one manager said to me one day, if you really want to have a strong message, say it in less than 3 sentences. Because the moment you get past 3 sentences, people have stopped listening. So, you maybe know the theory behind it better than me, Brene. I'm still living it and learning it. But 3 sentences. So I'm still struggling.
It's beautiful,
Me
Christia. And I think also you were speaking about pace and keeping it simple. Something that I'm also reminded of is keeping it honest. If you don't have the answer, it's okay to say you don't have the answer. And I learned that the hard way because I think, and I don't know if you guys are also like this, but like when somebody asks a question, you're already analyzing whatever you can link to this thing because you don't want to be perceived as being, unaware or uneducated on a certain matter. So something I'm learning, and I remember we also spoke about it last year, is it's okay not to have an answer. Be confident in that, but then you're not leaving it there. You'll go back and you'll do the research and you'll get back to them, or you can say, well, I don't have an answer for this, but I do know this and this. So I think in doing that, you can earn the trust of your speaker because now they are able to see that there is a slight vulnerability in you being open about the fact that you're not 100% sure about something. And I think that's quite a good a skill or just something to be aware of, because I think naturally when we're communicating, we feel this pressure in it because we feel like we always have to have all the right answers and this floral answer. But sometimes, like you said, Christia, it's about keeping it in 3 sentences, or it's even saying, I don't know. Miss B and Lobo, I see you've got your hand up. Would you like to share with us?
Good evening, ladies.
Good evening.
Apparently, I'm the victim of a loud person. I'm loud by nature, and I have to I have to sit in variety of meetings and make sure that people listen to what I say, okay? But the problem that one have approached me was that if you can lower your voice, maybe we are going to understand what you are saying. Because the meetings that I attend, I mustn't respond in three sentences like you say. Because I know that people will listen to you at the beginning, and then when times goes by, they are fantasizing, if I can put it in that way. But the problem about us loudspeakers is that people think that we are shouting, and we are not. We are like that. Many times I've tried to train myself to talk soft like you guys. You're talking soft. I don't have that voice, unfortunately. And we are struggling. I don't want to lie to you. We are struggling. And many people who will be surrounding you, who loves you the most, that you can be a changed person, will say, just lower your voice. And you try to lower your voice when you start to talk. But when you are in the middle of the presentation, and then you go on and the voice rises automatically and you cannot hear yourself. The only time when you realize that I've been raising my voice is when your jaws are paining. That's when you're going to realize that, oh, my voice has been low, but I told myself that I'm not going to be high, my voice is not going to be high. And then you are such a disappointment to yourself. And then you ask yourself, but did people heard the message that I delivered? You know, it's really not easy to us. To be honest, it's really not. And if I meet you for the first time and we are in a conversation, believe in me, you're going to say I'm fighting with you. And I'm not fighting. I'm just trying to make a point. And you say, that lady is very rude. You know, she didn't. No, I'm like that. Unfortunately, I don't know. You know, I used to say, why God did you give me this high voice? I don't need even a speaker when I present in a hall. I can do it without it. So in a small group of people, then you have to present, oh, Jesus Christ, then you are in trouble, to be honest. So if there is any mechanism that you guys can assist us with so that we can be lower people in terms of presenting ourselves, so that we are not going to be judged to be rude. Because every time when you try to open your mouth, yeah, that rude person, and it's not rude, it's my voice volume. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we all need to train ourselves in the same way that we need to train our muscles. We go to gym to build a muscle, we train to get fit, we do all sorts of things physically to build muscles and get stronger. We also need to train our brains, and we need to train ourselves in the skills that we want to develop. And we also need to give ourselves cheat sheets. When I'm at home, so I'm not at home at the moment, but on my home computer screen, I've got a whole bunch of post-it notes. One of them says, slow down. The next one says, breathe. The third one says, pause. And you have to, A, make it easy for yourself with whatever cheat sheets help you, and B, be very intentional in practicing and knowing your audience. So today I had a client, he's doing a presentation to a board, and he said to me, I don't know how to present to the board. And so the discussion we had was, you've got 5 minutes to present. You can only make 3 points. So make those 3 points well. Structure what you need to say. Pause. Lower your breath and your kind of voice. Speak from your lungs, not from your throat, okay, because we do a lot of that. And at the end of each sentence, pause, let the message sink in, and then move on to the next thing. And there is such authority in being able to actually just stop.
So Renee, I just want to add a bit to I didn't catch the name for being Law. So I know I don't look loud, but I don't know if Valencia will tell you I can be very loud. And I've been working from home for about the last 2.5 years. And if I open the windows, the neighbors across the road have said to me twice, "Oh, that's been a good meeting." And then you realize you're really loud because if they can hear me across the road and yeah, it's a good meeting, I've been too loud. So I'm trying to be timid, but it doesn't come naturally. I think being a trainer, automatically you have a habit of being portraying your voice louder and speaking up and doing everything. It did take a lot of work to try to tone it down. And you haven't heard me catching a train yet, but maybe Valencia can remember. I can say what normal people say in one sentence in 3 seconds. I can say in 0.2 seconds because I have a really bad habit to capture it so quickly. So it is training to get used to it. And as she said, I've told you, I've got my notes, slow down, speak softer, everything here. Just because I often present in meetings and then I just want to get the point over and I want to get there, and they only gave you 5 minutes and I can say a whole lot in 5 minutes. But you don't want that. You want to slow down that people hear you. So for me, there's a place and a time for everything. It's brilliant to be loud. It's brilliant to be yourself. It's just to find the right audience and the right time for it. Um, and I don't think everything that I discuss, I want my neighbors to know. And I'm honest if I say they're across the road, so if they can hear everything. So it does take time to actually work. And then the second thing, I think in our country specifically, we have to have more grace with one another because we do come from different cultures. And it's important that we try to understand where each other comes from. There's no norm of this is perfect. But in the workplace, there's norms for how a meeting will run or how something else will be done. And it's to find that nice balance in between, and to find what works for you as an individual. What works for me with my orange note, and I just want to show you, oops, it's really, yeah. So my orange note is really, yeah. It's got lots of things on it. So it's different things working for different people, but it doesn't make it wrong or right. You must find what's working for you. Or you must be loud like me that everybody in the neighborhood knows what you're busy with. But you have to adapt that message to the audience. And one of the questions, and I can't remember who asked it, is how to use your language to address your listeners. I can't remember, Valencia, what was the question again? But it's very important. You're on mute, so we can't hear you. So
Sorry, no problem. It was how stepping into the language of your listeners to serve your stakeholders.
exactly. So you have to think of who's your stakeholder and who's your listener, and then you have to step in the language that they want to listen. If I'm going to be as loud as I usually am, and I'm in a management meeting or in this, you would have maybe by now said, we're not going to listen to Christia. It's too incoherent and she's too fast. So it's really important to step into that language of whoever the stakeholder is. And if it takes some work, we're all growing in different areas of our own professional lives or personal lives. Then you identify it as an item that you sometimes want to work on, but please don't change. Just be yourself. It's better to have an authentic, loud person than a very timid person that don't address it. So don't change if it doesn't work for you, but try to adapt to situations.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for helping me with that question, Valencia. That helped.
No problem. And really, you're saying that that's the issue. Some of us on the other end, we wish we could project that much. A lot of people that we work with would appreciate that more. So really, sometimes what you see as a curse could actually be considered a blessing for somebody else. Just, one thing I wanted to say, and I think that, this differs for different situations, but I think Brownie even mentioned intention, like getting your intention through. That for me helps a lot. Like, for example, so my father, he is a mechanic and he's grown up for 30 years in this company, and he's in a workshop environment. So they're used to speaking loudly and harshly, and it's just the environment. So sometimes when he comes home, he speaks a little bit like that. He's never rude, but he's got that harshness. And but his intention is seen in certain things that he does. And I think in him like showing his intention, it was easier for us to adapt and then communicate. So I guess my point is that we're communicating with a range of different people, and how do we have grace, or how do we ask for grace or try and get grace from other people, is addressing or showing our intention, because I think sometimes showing people your heart or the point that you want to get across can help in being an effective communicator. And one more thing, well, this happens to me when I speak a lot, is sometimes, when you're hearing someone, you can lose track of what they're saying. So if you are maybe doing a presentation, sometimes it's always great, again, to show your intention or summarize the point that you're making, or explain why you're saying something. Because I think if somebody is maybe drifting while you're communicating, it kind of just pulls them back and helps them to find their place, so that they can also be engaged in the conversation. So I hope that helps. I saw we had a hand up. Was that Happiness?
It was Happiness, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Vanessa. Good evening, everyone. So yeah, I just wanted to, since we started this topic on communication and communicating in the language of our listener, I have the same problem as Christia. I speak very fast. And because I speak so fast, I always tell people I listen fast. So when people talk, I tend to finish their sentences in my head. So someone would be saying something and I'd be assuming or guessing where this conversation is going. And even when I'm talking to a group of people or giving a presentation, normally I'd be obviously have a roadmap of, I want to start here, I want to go there, and I want to end here. But because the roadmap is in my head, it goes so quickly that I end up leaving everyone behind. So what I've started doing after the first session, and I'd started initially, was reading the body language. I remember I asked a question, how do you read body language? Because sometimes you read it incorrectly. So the confused look on a person's face when they are listening to you, sometimes I tend to be also a bit loud. So when they sit or move back in their chairs when I'm talking, those kind of things are an indication on whether I'm being too loud or too fast for them. And that's when I just then either slow down or I reduce my volume. And another thing that I now have recently started doing is engage during a speech. So because I know I speak so fast, after finishing a thought or a topic or what a point, I want to know if they know what I've been talking about. So I'll engage with maybe one question, or just even if it's not a direct question, it's a like a question I ask, and then they will say it or they will nod or something like that. So in that way, I know that they are with me. If not, then I'll take a few steps back and then reiterate that point. So those are the things that I've found so far helpful. Still working on that. Especially, I found myself today being very irritated because we needed to get to a point. There was one decision that needed to be made, and people had to say what they needed to say, but they were going around in circles and didn't want to take, so I came to a point and said, what do we need? And someone was talking when I said that, because I'd started thinking so fast that I got to the conclusion before they finished their thought. So yeah, I'm still working on it, but those are the things that I've put in place and I've started trying out, and hopefully they'll help someone as well.
Thank you, Happiness. Thank you for sharing that. And 100%, I'm sure that everyone on this call actually can either relate or take something from that. So thank you for sharing. To me, I see you've got your hand up. Go for it.
Hi, ladies. Good evening. I hope you're all doing well. So I think from my side, the challenge has always been how to, effectively communicate and manage your emotions. I think emotional intelligence is one of the, issues that we really struggle with as women. I'll give you an example. How do you maintain composure, for instance, if, let's say, you are dealing with a person or an employee who's not really, forthcoming in terms of what they need to deliver on, and as you start engaging that person, then they start giving you excuses, and as a woman or as a person, normally what you will do is that you'll start getting agitated, you'll start getting irritated, and then from there you lose your cool, and then you start getting loud. So the question is, how do you strike a balance between, maintaining an effective, calm communication with the people, while also, being in control of your emotions?
Great question to me. Christia, can we hand that over to you?
Sorry, Valencia, I'm going to say and be honest, I didn't listen so well because I'm trying to read what's in the chat. So I do apologize.
No problem.
Apologies. I know you said you jump between, but sorry, Valencia. I'm rather going to be honest than saying I'm busy reading you at the side.
No problem at all. To me, would you like to just repeat your question?
Okay, my question was on striking a balance between maintaining a calm and composed communication, and also being in control of your emotions, because sometimes you find that as you are engaging people, and you expect them to deliver on certain items to give you feedback, then they start coming with stories, you start seeing them as excuses. And then naturally what you do is that you'll start seeing that this person is not just there coming to the party. Then you start losing your cool, and then from there you start raising your voice because you're getting agitated with the person. So that is a challenge that I'm struggling with, and that is a challenge that I've seen other counterparts as well struggling with it. So the question is, how do you ensure that you control your emotions while you still ensure that the message that you need to communicate to the next person is going across, effectively and calmly? So how do you maintain composure in such situations?
So, okay, Valencia, thanks that you asked for a repeat of the question. So to me, I think you've addressed a couple of things now. So conflict is difficult because if somebody don't perform or they don't deliver and you don't believe what they say, it's really difficult sometimes to respond to it and not have emotion to it. So my personal rule is step away a bit. Even if you say to the person, can we rather meet in an hour or hour later? And then I try to be factual because I can get emotional too, specifically if people promise stuff and they're not delivering it and there's no good reason for it. And then usually I start with questions. If a person says, yeah, but then you say, okay, how do you feel about it? How would you feel if you were in my shoes? How would you respond if you were in my shoes? And quite often when you put them in that situation where they have to think, but if I was there and this would happen to me, how would I feel? So you'll hear that I often say it when I say, but I always say to my kids, put yourself in somebody else's shoes before you respond. And then also put them in your shoes if they put you in a difficult situation, because it's the easiest way to get them to think about it. It's not necessarily going to help you to not respond because we have a habit. I have a habit too. If I'm upset with you now, I want to sort it out now. I want to get it settled, but it's not the best way to do it. The best way to do it is actually to step back a bit, to clarify it. I'm usually one of those that go and write down notes and say, okay, I'm upset because of this or this. And sometimes you're having a bad day for hundreds of other reasons, but I'm the employee that comes last in the day and say to you, I wasn't able to deliver what I promised you. And then that whole bomb of the day that went wrong will explode on my head. So it's really good for you as a leader or team leader or whatever to think about why do you feel the way that you feel before you respond. And you must get people to think about their actions and what the effect of their actions are. The easiest way is to say to them, come and sit down. And even if there's a silence, like say, for example, Valencia, I'm just using you because I know you. Valencia come and sit and said, sorry, she didn't get this order signed. It was supposed to be in today. And if I explode, Valencia's not going to learn anything from it. If she comes in and I say, okay, Valencia, what is the repercussions of this, or what is the impact of this? And then we quiet, and it keeps quiet. I've sat in meetings where it's 15 minutes of quietness and everybody wants to jump up and run away, but it's good because people start thinking, and the person then unpack, this is what's happened, this is what's happened, this is what's happened, and jointly you come to a solution that you might phone a customer and say, it is a problem, our system boomed out, we couldn't get in, unfortunately we're a little late, but can you be lenient? There's always a solution. If the solution is we didn't make this tender, we're going to try the next one, that's also a solution, but rather try to put heads together and get people to think about it. So touch wood, that's what's been working for me. I hope, to me, that you can apply some of that and it will help you too. But unfortunately, there's no golden buzzer that can save you from those. Sometimes we do have emotional explosions because people just push us too far. Let's just try to get control of those situations.
Thank you, Christia, and thank you, Tumi. I hope that answered your question. I think that was a very practical approach. I'm just mindful of the time, and if it's okay with you guys, I'll just wrap it up. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you, Christia, for being such an awesome panelist. You literally, we could, I think, speak for hours, and I think everybody knows on the call why you are here, because you're just amazing. And thank you for just being so authentic in your responses and giving us something to think about. Thank you so much, Raksha and Brownie, for arranging and leading, I think, not just today's conversation, but the work that you do. Really, it inspires us. And the fact that we can have these kind of conversations, there's somebody on the call that's being impacted. And if not, I was definitely impacted by hearing from you guys. So thank you. I don't know if Raksha, Brownie, or Christia, you guys have anything you want to share, or if we should close it up.
Well, I just want to congratulate you, Valencia, on facilitating an absolutely wonderful conversation. You have done a marvelous job. Yeah, you should be proud of how you've pulled this together. And Christia, as the sole panelist on the panel, thank you for stepping in and sharing all of your wisdom and being really human in the way that you've chatted with us about communicating effectively.
Sarah Kisha, I don't know if you want to say something.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Go. One thing that I want to say is, remember, we're all just a sum total of the experiences that we had. None of us are better or less better. And I think that's the thing in life that helped me. Usually I wouldn't speak up. And when I was younger, I think everybody's better educated or better experienced or better spokespersons than I am. But we're all the sum total of the experiences that were afforded to us. And I think in these situations, each one of us have opportunity to some way be a role model for somebody else. May it be a younger sister or somebody in the workplace or somewhere. For me, it's important that if you learned anything today, not even from me, from any one of us that spoke, that you pay it forward and actually teach other people. And that's the one thing in life that helped me, is that every time I learn something, if you have the opportunity to share, to go and share it. And I want to say thank you, because these are the type of things that I love. But since my new role, I don't have it so much. Valencia knows how much I love people and everything. So I want to say thank you to you guys, because you helped me to just chat tonight and to be able to share wisdom that is not because of me, but because of opportunities that were afforded to me. So thank you so much. Just wanted to say thank you.
And I guess just to echo, I think what Bryony and Valencia have already said. Christia, thank you so much. Bryony, as always, we learn so much from these mentorship sessions, so thank you so much for sharing them with us. And Valencia, a very, very, very great job. So well done to you. I'm also so proud of you. Thanks everyone for joining, and we look forward to the next session, which will be towards the end of next month, and more details of that will be shared on our social platform soon. So thanks everybody, and have a good evening. Cheers.
Yeah, wonderful.
Bye.
Bye.